Hi beekeepers, welcome to the second in our video series of building the Parkinson Hive. Today we're going to build the roof, and there are two options for that roof. The first one is a lift and pull off roof, and the second one is a hinged roof, which I like and I recommend. I'll show you both of them in the video, so let's get started. Okay, now we're going to measure for the roof. We measure from the back of the back leg to the front of the door to try to get an estimate here, and then what we're going to do is add 1.5 inches, which is 3/4 for the board in the back and 3/4 for the board in the front, to give us an overlap. Now we don't want to get too far out, otherwise we'll have interference from the door opening. And so it's important to measure your own hive. Although there are dimensions in the build manual, double check with your own measurement and make sure that this stuff is going to come together the way you expect. So for me, this looks like it's going to be about 52 inches. So I'll cut a piece of plywood that's that long, and then the width of the hive. And the same thing for the width, we're going to measure, and then we're going to add 2 to that, so about 28 inches wide, and that's 3/4 on each half, so that's 1.5 plus a 1/4 inch space, so that's 2 inches overall that we need the top to be wider than the outside of this frame. So we'll make that cut and get that piece of plywood ready. Now we're going to mark off our plywood and cut it out. And a word about plywood, there's different grades of plywood. Now I'm going to be putting some shingles on this, so I didn't opt for anything that was finished. So if you're just going to be painting the surface, get the plywood that has a finished side on it so that you've got a smooth side to paint, and the water will shed off of there easier. And if you're going to be putting, just roofing material or steel on it, or aluminum or anything like that, you can just use regular plywood. All right, and then you've got your top cut out, and we're ready to frame it in. Okay, to make both ends of the top, what we're going to do is we're going to cut 1x6 to the same width as the top, which is about 28 inches in my case. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to set up the table saw to rip that 1x6 that we just cut. We're going to set the blade to 20 degrees, or match it to the frame holders that we cut. And we're going to make it about 1.5 inches wide here. And just rip that. Okay, now we're going to glue and staple on that front board. So this is the 1.5 inch cut here. And you can see where the 20-degree angle is. That board juts out just a little bit. So just get that set up, glue it, and staple it. And now we're going to glue and staple that back board on. And just as the front board jutted out, this one's going to slide underneath. So the 20-degree angle takes the board underneath like this. Get it lined up and glue and staple just like we did the front. And then this is what the top should look like with that short front piece and the longer back piece. And then we're going to fit a side piece in there. Now if you're doing a standard 1x2 side with the holes through the back to hold the top in place, you place the 1x2 on top like this, and you trace a line underneath, and then you cut along that line to get your 20-degree angle, and you do that on both ends. I'm going to do a hinged version, so I'll show you how that's going to work instead. For the hinged version, you're going to cut a 1x4 at that 20-degree angle on the back end, and then you'll do the same thing on the front and trim it. So with that end tucked in tight, what you want to do is go down here and make a mark underneath here on the 20-degree, so you know exactly where to cut, and then cut the board. And then you can check and make sure that that board that you cut will fit the other side as well, and assuming it does, you can use it as a template and cut out another one just like it. Once everything's all set, what I'm going to do is trim that little bit of 3/16 off so that it's flush, just to give it a finished look. We'll just stack both boards together and then cut them all together at once so they're exactly the same, right or wrong. And then you get a nice finished edge. Looks kind of retro chic, and you're ready to go. Now the reason we use a 1x4 here is when we're using the hinges, we want the weight to be carried along this edge and not just along the back end where the hinges are going to be. So we need a little more beef along the edge here. And since these edges are going to be carrying more weight, rather than just stapling them, we're going to pre-drill some holes and sink some screws in here to make sure that the weight of the roof is distributed down to this 1x4. And then on the back we do the same thing. We pre-drill a couple of holes and attach this back plate to the side with screws so that the weight transfers in here as well as we can. Okay, now we're going to do the tops. There are two ways to do that. One is the lift-off top, which was the original. And what you do is you measure down about 3 inches and you put one of these screw bolt combination things in. And you do that on each side. And this is just going to hold the top in place so that it can't come off. And then you'll slide it back and off of there. So you drill that in, and then we're going to lay the top on and press it into this to make a little mark. And then we'll drill 2 holes, and I'll show you that. Alright, I'm going to cheat and use a finished top so that you can see kind of what we're looking for here. When this screw, where this screw hits the top, is kind of the center of where you need it to be, so that there's enough room for it to slide in. So you drill a hole that just goes to the bottom of that, and then another hole on the top, so that when it slides down, the screw has room to slide, so it'll slide up. That's why you drill a hole toward the bottom and then one on top of it. So again, if we take a look this way, you can see that the screw has moved up. So when you're drilling that first hole, the bottom of the first hole should be, give the bottom of the screw a little bit of space, and then you drill one hole above that, and then you could just connect them with a jigsaw, or just kind of round them out like I did here. And that'll get the top to slide on, and then, you know, it won't be able to pop up if a critter or the wind is trying to get at it. Okay, installing the hinge top isn't terrible, but it takes a little more work. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the top so it's lined up so there's about an even space on each side. And then we're just going to mark right where that top meets that 2x4. Because what we're going to do is we're going to have this hinge down. So you got to know where we're going to put our hinges on this. So we'll put the hinges on now. Okay, and then once you've got your hinges installed, this should sit right over there. And the hinge should fit nice and snug in there, like that. And the same thing on this other side. Alright, once that hinge is installed, and we know where it's going to go, what we do is we mark a straight line across the top here. We're just going to saw that off. And that'll allow it to hinge on the top, and this point wouldn't hit the top there. So that's a little thing I discovered, that we need to cut that off. So we'll do that now. And then all we have to do is put the screws in here, and we'll be good to go. Okay, the last thing we need to do for the hinge top is we need to put a stop block on, and you cut this to, you know, 20 degrees, and then this is about 6 inches on the short side. And now I put 3 staples in here. I staple into the plywood, and then one in the center here, and then pre-drill for screws, because this is potentially going to have a lot of flex, or potential to flex. So when the hive top tilts up, what we're going to do is we're going to drill holes through this 3/4 inch board and into that 2x4. We're going to put a pin all the way through there, and that'll keep the top in place while we're working it. Okay, the last thing we're going to do for the hinge is put a doubler on here, another 1x4 on the inside, so that the weight isn't carried across an open space. It's carried through 2 1x4s and spread across the whole thing. So we'll drill a hole through there and show you how that looks. Okay, here I'm putting shingles on the top. You can put whatever you want on the top or just paint it. But if you're putting shingles, I put this extra construction adhesive, so I don't use the brand name. And make sure that I've got plenty of it on there, because you know, roofs generally don't move but this roof does move, so shingles aren't really designed for moving that much. So I want to make sure that you get that construction adhesive in there and hold the shingles on, and then I staple it on, and I'll show you that in a second. One other thing, when you're putting the shingles on, if you've got construction adhesive right where the seam is, I scrape it away from there, and if you're smart, you just mark where that seam is going to be and don't put the construction adhesive there, but I screwed up. Anyway, that way it doesn't squish up through the crack there. So I'll put the other one in and staple it in and show you what that looks like. And then you just staple it on. I use 1/2 inch staples here because we've got 1/2 inch material here, so the staples won't go through. And they just hold it in place. And I put, put them along here. And then I staple down the edges because that's the most likely place to come up. So I staple along the edges so that they're nice and secure. And then just keep going and finish it up. Congratulations, beekeepers. That's the end of the second video here in our series of building the Parkinson Hive. That's chapter 11 in the build manual if you're keeping track. So I'll put links to the other videos down below as we get them. And then the only thing left to complete the stand is the door. We'll do that one next. So see you next time.